Hi. I was really hesitant to do this episode. In part because I know that these films have already been talked about by other much larger channels, but mostly because I'm certain that if I get hate for any of the films I do on this channel, it's gonna be for this one. Because to talk about why I think the first one was so incredible, we unfortunately have to talk about why I think the sequel fell so flat. So grab your brooms, baby, and let's ride! Because we're talking about the Hocus Pocus films.
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.
The first Hocus Pocus came out in 1993, and the sequel dropped the same year this video came out, 2022. Both films were written by the same person, David Kirshner, the creator of Fievel Goes West, along with having producing credits on Child's Play, The Flintstones, another film I covered, go check that out, Titan AE, and the early 90s Addams Family show. Both films also have the same trio of actresses. Sarah Jessica Parker is the happy-go-lucky youngest witch Sarah, Peggy Hill voice actress Kathy Najimy as the humorous and slightly absent-minded Mary, and the illustrious, the incomparable, the magnificent Bette Midler as the oldest and leader of the Sisters' Coven, Winifred. So off the bat, you might already be thinking to yourself, well, if the writer was the same and the cast is the same, why does this feel so different the second time around? Well, in my opinion, I think it comes down to the directors. The first Hocus Pocus was directed by Emmy Award-winning director Kenny Ortega. He's had his hand in Gilmore Girls, High School Musical, and the Descendants trilogy. The sequel was directed by Anne Fletcher. Directing-wise, she's mostly known for doing The Proposal in 2009, but a large majority of her experience comes from her time as a choreographer. She's helped with everything as far back as Boogie Nights and Casper, to more recent projects like Hairspray and Get 'Em to the Greek, two other films I covered pretty thoroughly, so also go check those out. So why do I think it comes down to the director and not the writer? Because directors often get to change things within the script as well, often leading to straying from the original intent. The first film leaned heavily into the more eerie and mysterious vibes that a story like this can naturally offer, which can clearly come from Ortega's understanding of how to establish worlds like this. The second film leaned more so into the theatrics and showmanship that Fletcher is much more accustomed to. Don't believe me? Well, let's break it down. The first of the examples is how each film opens. In the first installment, we get the silhouette of Sarah flying across the sky and singing her Pied Piper song. It wakes up Thackeray, who realizes his sister is missing. He then finds his friend, tells him to gather the townsfolk, and then sprints after his sister. We get some wonderful character building time with the sisters and their relationship, and despite just appearing to be bumbling and squabbling amongst themselves, we get a rather terrifying show of the witch's power. Winifred electrocutes the absolute shit out of Thackeray, and then the trio rather painfully physically morph him from a human into a cat. The second installment, we get a look at the trio while they're still children, and to the film's credit, it is done pretty well, and it's a hilarious bit that I love. But what I don't love is the fact that we get so little time with the younger trio before a creepy pedo witch shows up, sniffs Winifred from the crotch up, and then simply hands them a spellbook and says, well, good luck. It just felt so rushed and lacked any real weight or emotion. Films, whether for kids or adults, should always strive to have some strong openings that hook your audience and make them invested to see more. The first film did it in spades, and the second, in my opinion, simply fell flat. The second of the examples comes from the general level of knowledge that our set of characters possess. In the first film, Max and Danny have little to no idea about the Sanderson sisters or about magic in general. The first time we see Max, he's bashing on the Sanderson story he's being told in class. Allison, on the other hand, having been born and raised in this town, is all too familiar with the sisters, the book, and the Black Flame candle. She provides a lot of the early info we get to know about the witches, and it's Binks who fills us in on the rest, both in terms of what he was doing before and after the witches came back. They consistently use their wits and knowledge to hold the witches at bay and ultimately win. In the second film, the main duo do know about magic and they do practice it themselves. That I have no issue with. They do also show some real smarts in the way they're able to dupe the witches, so bravo. Here's what I have a massive issue with. This is Gilbert. This is a man who was born and raised in this town, much like Allison, even saw the witches the first night they returned, and we'll get back to that in just a moment, runs the local museum, and yet is categorically the most brain-dead person in the entire town and story. Despite knowing the witches and their intentions to eat children and rule forever, he decides to give the goddamn black flame candle to goddamn teenagers that he knows are going to light it, and yet is somehow shocked that the witches are still out for kids. At one point, he tries to explain that he wanted to bring the sisters back because he was made fun of as a kid for believing in them and he wanted to prove everybody wrong. But that still doesn't explain why he gave the candle to kids he claims to like, knowing they would be the first on the chopping block. Then the witches threaten him to do as they command, and he's still somehow puzzled that all of this is going wrong. His knowledge and motivations make absolutely no sense, and it will never cease to bother me. How is it that he's able to see the witches with no issue when in the first film it's clearly established that all of the children were under a spell and walking towards the witch hut? But he says he was just walking home after getting his candy stolen and that he saw them fly across the sky. How the hell is he not under the spell? Seriously, it makes zero sense to me. Saving the best example for last, we move on to the musical numbers, which is again why I mentioned the distinction in directors. Because the setup and execution of the scenes are day and night of each other. The first film's musical number, and there's only one, by the way, has a fantastic setup. Max and the gang barge into the adult Halloween party, jump on stage, steal the mic from the singer, and tell the town that their kids are in danger. It immediately makes everyone stop and actually listen to him for a moment. And yeah, they laugh once he actually tries to explain what's going on, but Max is absolutely panicked, as you most certainly would be in that situation. And when he points out the sisters in the crowd and Winifred begins to sing, it isn't a full number right off the bat. She's mimicking the song that the band was playing only moments earlier, slowly transitioning it to become a spell casted upon the entire crowd. The scene, start to finish, is executed perfectly, and it's another great indication of just how powerful they are. However, in the second film, they just break out into a full song and dance number the very moment they're summoned back. No surprise, no confusion from any of the three. They just show up and start jamming, knowing that, hey, this is going to be turned into a music video. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the earlier material and its meaning and context, and it's only done to have some cheap laughs and keep the story lighthearted. And no, I don't have an issue with films if they want to laugh and be lighthearted. My issue is when sequels want to cash in on the original without taking any time to properly understand what made it great in the first place. Rather than dissect the film and understand the themes and story elements, the sequels throw its hands in the air and says, well, the first one had a song in it, so let's do another one. The first one had a black cat, so let's add another one. The witches lost their broom in the first one, so let's make them lose their brooms again. It's a flat, boring retread of a carefully crafted story. Look, I'm not saying that the sequel had zero merit. There are some genuinely funny moments to be had. What I'm saying is, the production team clearly put very little research and thought into the story they were being asked to continue. And that's a damn shame, because the first film was so incredible, and it's that level of quality that made it such a staple in Western Halloween culture. Had the sequel been the original, this would have been forgotten within 3 years, and they never would have been thrown money for another continuation of this. But at the end of the day, you're still allowed to like both in equal measure, so what do I know? But I'm curious. What do you think?
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.